So give it up for Anna.
First off, I want to say thank you to the organizers of Python Italia for hosting EuroPython and providing us such wonderful food. Yay! Best conference food ever. Okay. My name is Anna Martelli Ravenscroft. I'm married to Alex Martelli, the Martelli bot. And I'm a member of the PSF. I was the first female member of the PSF. And I am co-editor with Alex of the second edition of the Python Cookbook. I was the first individual female. You were there with a company, to my understanding. Yeah. That was what I was told at the time. I have a bachelor's from Stanford in cognitive neuroscience, and I'm lucky enough to be able to apply Python and open source at a startup in Silicon Valley for learning and cognition research. So that's me. And yes, I'm a bit more diverse than most. Okay. How many people here have had diversity training at work, or wherever? Hardly anybody. Wow. You guys never work at big corporations, huh? Yeah, well, in the U.S., almost everyone has because they get really obnoxious about it. So what do you think of when you hear the word diversity? Anyone? That's a question. You have to answer. We're not going forward till someone answers something.
Twice as much as a university.
Okay, well, that was an answer. Wonderful. Okay. Moving on. So the usual way that diversity training is presented is with moral justification, legal justification, political and social justification. You should do diversity because you want to be a good person, right? And you should do diversity in order to be a good person. You should do it for legal reasons. No one wants to get sued for harassment or for, discrimination, things like that. And you want to promote equality and inclusiveness. These are great reasons for doing diversity. Unfortunately, all too often, the rhetoric of diversity comes down to guilt, which is known as the great motivator. There was a study I read where guilt is a social emotion, and it's a self-punishment system to stop antisocial behavior, and it's a motivator to induce pro-social reparatory behavior. Well, okay, sure. Unfortunately, what using guilt in the context of diversity does is it sets up something called cognitive dissonance. Everyone thinks, I'm a good person. Everyone wants to think, I'm a good person. If you tell someone, if you're not doing diversity, you're a bad person, there's a dissonance between your view of yourself and what you're being told. How do you resolve that dissonance? You can change your behavior and do more diversity stuff, or you can just reject the message that you're getting and say, well, yeah, but what's that got to do with running code? What's that got to do with programming? I don't want to hear about it. So it's two very common ways of dealing with cognitive dissonance. And we're going to take questions at the end unless you're having trouble right now with a particular thing. Yes? We'll get into that. Yeah. I'm talking about things like hiring diverse groups, diverse individuals, or, having diverse members of your team, things like that. So, in diversity discussions in the past, often you see people either laying guilt trips on people, threatening to guilt trip someone, or trying to avoid guilt. And, I don't like guilt as a motivator. It makes me angry when someone tries to use guilt as a motivator. So I'm going to declare this a guilt-free zone. For this talk, and hopefully the rest of EuroPython, and the rest of your discussions the rest of your life with Python at least, let's drop the guilt, okay? I don't like when people use diversity as a club to beat people with, when people say, oh, well, you don't have enough women on your team, and therefore you're a bad team. You don't have enough people of color, therefore you're bad. I don't want to hear it. Oh, you didn't go to the diversity talk, therefore you're a bad person. We're in Florence, Italy. If somebody's not here, there's a lot of really good reasons why they might not be here. So I don't want to hear about, people who aren't here that, they don't care about diversity. We're not going to play diverser than thou games. Yes, I love this flying spaghetti monster. And we're not going to lay any traps. So what we are going to talk about is why diversity matters. And not in the moral terms or the political, social terms, but in terms of a question that everyone asks themselves when they go to any kind of training. What's in it for me? Why should I care about this? Why should I attend this? And because we're at Python, EuroPython, and most of us care about Python a lot, what's in it for Python? Why should the PSF create a diversity statement? I mean, what's that got to do with code? So, I want to talk about this in terms of, the title of the talk was Diversity as a Dependency. Well, we all know about dependencies. I remember when I first started installing Linux, and the Linux CDs, you would get this CD to install it, and it didn't tell you what the dependencies were. You had to go in and look at the man page. Oh, well, it's a Linux port of the Unix blah, blah, blah. Well, but what does it do, and do I need it? And sometimes I would guess right, and sometimes I wouldn't. And it would kind of limp along, but it didn't have the right dependency, so it would only limp along. Well, as far as I'm concerned, diversity is a dependency for Python, and I hope that I'll help you understand why. So, the rest of the talk, we're going to go through some studies. I'm going to present a diversity model to think about diversity, and then we're going to have some final wrap-up, and then if you can please hold your questions till the end, because I want people to be able to hear the whole talk and then go to dinner, and if people have questions, they can stick around. Okay? Because, it's Italy. It's all about the food. Yes, Laura? Okay. So let's jump into the talks. In 1957, Robert K. Merton published a study of a small town. And what he did was he wanted to find out, outside of the hierarchy of the town, the mayor, the council members, things like that, who had the most influence in that town. And so the way he went about it was a little different. What he went and did was check what newspapers and magazines they were subscribed to. Now, this was a small town in America and in the United States, and some people were subscribed to magazines like Life and to newspapers like, New York Times or whatever. And some people were subscribed to the local newspaper and maybe, Agriculture Quarterly or something very specific to what they did. And what he found was that the people who actually were the influenced the decision making in the town and had the most impact in the town as far as influence were the ones who he labeled as cosmopolitan as opposed to provincial, and the cosmopolitan ones were the ones who were subscribed to newspapers and magazines outside of the town. They brought in ideas from the world outside, not just focused on the inside. And so they had a lot more perspective and a lot of different ways of looking at the things that were being discussed in the town. And so they had a lot more influence. So from small town America to a big corporation, Ronald S. Burt did a study, a huge network analysis, and I love this picture, I think it looks really cool, of all the people thousands and thousands of people at this corporation. And he figured out who talked to who and who ran ideas by who and things like that. And then he did a network analysis of these different people. And what he wanted to find out was who is the most creative people in this corporation. And so we're going to look at one little section. And if it will go forward for me, oh, thank you. We're going to look at this one little section and see what he found out. Now, you've got this 3 clusters here among thousands, okay? And we've got a person here named James. James is a very popular person. He talks to a lot of people, probably all people in his department, maybe even all people in his team, and doesn't talk to people outside of his team or department very much. You can see who he talks to. They're all part of an in-group. So then we've got Robert. And Robert over here talks to some of the same people as James. They're probably in the same department. But he also talks to people outside of his department across what are called structural holes. So people who are outside of the department or different parts of the company or different kinds of job titles, the different silos. Why does this matter? What Burt did was he looked at, they did a study, they said, okay, submit ideas, things for the company, things that you think the company could do to improve processes, products, etc. And then he had judges, both people from inside the corporation, the top level people in the corporation, and other judges to say, okay, how many creative ideas were there? What were the most creative? And also what were the most feasible ideas? And what he found out was that the people who had the most contacts across the structural holes, rather than just within the in-groups, were the ones who came up with the most creative ideas and also the best ideas overall, the ones that were most feasible. They had perspectives on their problem domain from other domains. On to science. Science is fun. The most exciting phrase to hear in science, the one that heralds new discoveries, is not Eureka, but gee, that's funny. Isaac Asimov. Scientists, what do all day? They solve hard problems. And often they work in labs, a lot of them, and a lot of these problem solving is in lab meetings. So a guy named Dunbar wanted to find out how do they do this and what's the best ways of doing it. So what he found out was that the best discoveries came from unexpected results, but that individuals who were working alone rather than in lab meetings tended to dismiss the unexpected results much more than the lab meetings did. But beyond that, there were differences between different labs as far as how well they actually made discoveries based on these unexpected results. And so he wanted to figure that out further. What he found out was the ones who did best used analogies to explain, well, maybe the unexpected result is because of something like this. And those analogies helped to lead to conceptual changes. Now, other than Alex and Andrew, can somebody tell me what this is, this picture? Yes, exactly. Ouroboros, the worm that eats itself. What does that have to do with science? Anyone know? Yep, exactly. It was a dream by someone who was trying to figure out the structure of benzene, and he had a dream of Ouroboros, and that's where he made the conceptual leap to what the structure of benzene was. Now, that's really cool. And what Dunbar did was said, okay, which groups are making the conceptual leaps here? And what he found was that the people who had different pools of experience, different pools of knowledge in their lab were the ones who did the best as far as actually innovating, as far as making discoveries. They were the ones who were able to bring very different knowledge to bear and figure out what was going on and find out new ways of approaching problems. So, we are going to review these studies briefly. Basically, what they all come down to, these classic studies, these aren't new studies, these are classic studies in sociology, and they all point to the same conclusion, that it's not just that we're going beyond what individuals can do as a group, but it's what individuals can accomplish who are different from each other, and the benefits extend beyond the individuals. We're going to unpack this statement. This is from a book called The Difference, and it's by someone named Scott Page, and I highly recommend that you read it. It's a really well-done book on diversity and how diversity improves creativity and innovation in companies and schools and business. But we're going to unpack this a little bit. So, there's different kinds of diversity. This is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about diversity. I'm talking about these aspects of these different characteristics of individuals. People have different needs and motivations. They have different skill sets, and they have different perspectives. You know what? You notice what's not on here is things like gender, race, identity, all of the usual diversity stuff that you hear about when you're at diversity training or talking about diversity on lists. That's not on here. We're going to talk about that later, but those things, I was talking with Andrew earlier, and those things are more of a proxy for these characteristics, which is what we want in our groups, in our teams, in our open source projects, in Python, the Python community. So when we're talking about what's in it for me and what's in it for Python, we want to talk about these characteristics. Now, how many people here have contributed to Python? Raise your hands. Okay. How many of you have done any of this? Oh, well, we know Laura's done all of these, but okay. Now, let's think about why you did those things, whatever those things are. By the way, you are here at EuroPython. You are therefore contributing to the Python community. So thank you for contributing to Python. We're here because we're scratching an itch. We do these things because we're scratching an itch. Individuals have different itches to scratch. Now, we need people like Laura Creighton and the PyPy group to create a small, flexible Python because they want a small, flexible Python. We need people like Tim Peters, who is like really, really into sorting algorithms, to figure out the Tim sort. We need people like Raymond Hettinger, who's like really, really into speed, to create things like iter tools and make Python faster. So, we need a lot of different kinds of people here. We need the people who can organize conferences. I mean, good grief. Wow. One of the objections that people have when we're talking about, we need these different kinds of people is, isn't that going to just cater to special interest groups? And what's in it for everybody? So, there's this concept called universal design. And it's, I think, a really good thing to keep in mind when you're thinking about diversity. How many people have used a curb cut on your way here with a rolly bag, walking through the streets to be able to get here without having to go bumping up and down the curbs? If you've taken a bicycle up and down a curb cuts are really helpful. If any of you are parents and you've pushed a stroller, curb cuts are really helpful. Curb cuts were not created for these purposes. They were created for people who are in wheelchairs. But a lot of us find it really helpful to have curb cuts for totally other reasons. Text-to-speech. I have it on my Kindle, and I love it when I'm driving and I want to keep reading the book that I'm reading. And it can just tell me the stuff. It wasn't created for that. It was created so that people with visual impairments or who are blind can also read the book, but it's helpful for everyone. Subtitles and captions. I mean, look at this audience. How many people here find those to be really, really helpful? Even when you're watching a movie in your own language with dialects or strong accents, I find it really helpful. It's also very helpful for people who are hard of hearing. But just because it was created to solve one particular problem doesn't mean that it doesn't extend beyond to a whole lot of other people. And if you do design right, by scratching these itches, you're going to actually end up scratching a lot of itches that you didn't even know about. So, differing skill sets. We are not all going to be attackers. We're not all going to be goalkeepers. But these people are both really great soccer players. Just because you're hiring people or looking for people on your projects who have different skill sets doesn't mean that you're going to compromise your desire for people who are really, really good at Python. It just means that you want people who have different skill sets, because that's what's going to make your team great. That's what's going to get you to have the best possible outcome that you could possibly have. So we all have different skill sets that we bring to Python. Not everyone can give a talk like Alex. Not everyone can, explain human factors like Fitz. Not everyone can organize a conference with this kind of food. Did I mention that I really appreciate the food? So, skill sets, we all have different skill sets. Perspectives, we all come from different perspectives. And this is where identity and gender and race and all of those things that you usually think of as diversity, where they really come into play, because they're basically a proxy for different perspectives. Growing up as a female in Minnesota, I have a very different perspective than growing up male in Italy, or as someone in Germany, or someone, I didn't grow up in rural areas. I didn't go to a rural college. So my perspective on, for example, networking, I had broadband pretty early. Not everyone does. Someone who had to live with dial-up for a long time is going to have a different perspective than someone who lives on broadband. I think we all have a little perspective on that here. Sorry. So we all have different perspectives, and that's based on our different backgrounds, on things like the college we went to, or if we went to college, on where we grew up and how we grew up, and our own identities. Those perspectives affect problem solving. So when I started out in Python, Alex said that programming is for people who really love problem solving because there's always so many problems to solve. And, we all approach problems in different ways, and we may even see different problems. If you are in the United States, you may not care about internationalization until you get someone who cares about internationalization and wants to scratch that itch, and then they fix it. We'll see different solutions. So what I want you to understand is diversity matters. And it's not just for the moral reasons, the political reasons. It's the very pragmatic reasons. All those different ways that people contribute to Python, those are the reasons diversity matters. The reasons that each one of you are here is why diversity matters. We all have those different needs and motivations, those different skill sets, and those different perspectives, and those together generate the innovation and creative problem solving, which leads to better software. Now, in my view, as Raymond mentioned that Python is a really awesome language, as far as I'm concerned, Python's already the best programming language, but it's not quite the best language it can be yet. For Python to be the best language, we need all those different itches, those different skill sets and perspectives. We need all of those different things brought to bear on Python to make it what it needs to be out there. Not just the people who are here, but the people who aren't here. It's necessary. It's not sufficient, though. Because diversity is hard. You can't just grab a random bunch of people, throw them in a room, and expect miracles. Because you can't even expect them all to just get along. You can't expect them to communicate with each other. Look at the difference in usage of the word tabling in British versus American English. Oscar Wilde, I think it was, said that the Brits and the Americans are divided by a common language. If you look at tabling in one, to table some topic means to discuss it right now. In the other, it means, no, we'll discuss it later. Or never. If you don't know about that difference, you're going to have trouble communicating, even if you're speaking theoretically the same language. We have different goals and priorities. Passwords are an example of this. Your password has to have at least 10 different characters. You have to have an uppercase letter, a lowercase letter, a number, and a special character. No words that are in the dictionary. Oh, and it has to be memorable because you can't write it down. I'm sorry, I can't do all of those things at once. Usability and security are different goals and priorities. They're both important, but you need to be able to balance those, and you need to have people who are thinking about both of them in order to find a way through. We have to be able to value those other perspectives and skill sets. One of the very common things that I hear from people is, oh, well, it's just documentation. Or it's just usability. We'll talk to the user interface people later, and right now we're just trying to get it to work. well, yeah, it works better if you talk to them at the beginning. And then you don't have it as just like this little thing you stuck on at the end. I'm so glad to see some of the awards that were given on things like community, things like documentation. And it's nice to see that Python values those things. So, how do you do it? If it's so hard, how do you do it? Well, you have things like education. Education like talking about diversity at conferences like this, bringing up cultural differences, things like that, to facilitate the communication. You set up clear processes and goal setting, things like the PEPs. We have that already in Python. We're ahead of the game here. We have clear decision making. As Raymond said, you got a problem with lambdas, talk to the BDFL. And you need people who are willing to work on it. I want to have you think about a thought experiment for me. You have to create a web app, okay? It's got to work in Firefox and Safari and Opera and Lynx. Yes, some people still use Lynx. Oz isn't here, but netbooks, mobile phones, both iPhone and Android. And by the way, BlackBerry too. Can't forget them. And yes, it actually does have to work in Internet Explorer. So all of those different requirements, they're kind of a pain in the butt to achieve all of those at once. And that's when you've got APIs and SDKs and docs and specs and help forums and books and design patterns and all of these resources just to help you to be able to communicate cross-platform and across browsers. Well, people are harder. Every single person in here and every single person you meet has a different OS, a different chipset, a different browser, and we don't come with docs. So, well, some software, yeah. So when you hear about things like the PSF getting together to write a diversity statement, or even just a mailing list to discuss diversity issues, it might help if you think about that as creating docs for people, and you might understand why they're doing it, because people are hard, and the more we discuss things like this, and the more we actually write things down and hammer it out, the better we'll be at being able to harness the diversity that we need to make Python the best programming language, not just the best programming language out there, but the best programming language that it can possibly be for everybody. And yes, Damien Conway, who's a Perl guy, but has good ideas anyway, speaking of diversity, says you can never go wrong with kittens. So there's my diversity statement. Thank you all. Okay, questions? Answers? Dinner?
That was quick. That was quick. No, the question and answers actually.
Yeah, okay. Hey, nobody spoke up, so must be dinner time.
Any question?
No.
So, I have a question. So,
Okay. Oh, good. I think.
besides all the so every diversity is important, but one of the main ones that programming in general is dealing with right now is that there aren't a lot of women that do programming, and in general, in the field of technology, I remember in my university class, over 2,800 students, I think about 50 were women. And why do you think this is? And if you can give that answer. And how do you think the Python community can change, if it needs to change, in order to get to capture all those 50 women in their course, so they all come to EuroPython?
Okay. Well, first off, I actually did a paper at Stanford on women in programming. And in order to do this, one of the things that I did for my research was borrow something called the Encyclopedia of IT and Gender Perspectives, or 1,200 pages of research on gender and IT. I know how big it is. It's 2 volumes because I had to carry it home in my bicycle. And that's just one of the resources out there. Everyone is studying this. Everyone is trying. There was an article on the airplane riding over here from, the Financial Times, on women in IT and how it's just as bad, if not worse. I don't have any answers to that, unfortunately. I wish I did. I do know that Python as a community is very open and welcoming to everyone, and that the kinds of things that we do really help us to capture those people. If you expand the view of IT, though, not just to programming, but to things like web design and some of those other kind of fringe areas, you actually see a lot more women at some of those things. The user interface, the HCI classes I went to, the human computer interface classes I went to at Stanford were at least half women. The educational technology classes were at least half women. It was just the computer science classes that were less than that. But it still wasn't like empty. It was, it still wasn't no women. It was less, though, maybe more like 20%. But there are women out there. There are women interested. There's also some really awesome community events going on, training classes that are focused on being open to newbies, that are specified that women, we want you to come here and learn Python, and they're being swamped. There's Rails, Ruby on Rails, the Rails group kind of started some of this stuff, and there's a bunch of Pythonistas who got together and said, that's a really good idea, and started doing it. Part of it is just the perception of computers are guy stuff. Hopefully with more of the social networking stuff and kids growing up with computers these days, the computers as a male preserve will die out the death that it should be. Women are using computers. They're comfortable. My daughter is 20. She doesn't consider herself a geek, even though she lives on the computer. I don't quite understand how this works, but she writes HTML as a native language. She thinks in HTML. But I'm not a geek. Yeah, okay, if you say so. So I don't have any answers to how to get more women into computer science. I wish I did. But on the other hand, I am going to be at the Grace Hopper Celebration of Women in Computing, where there are like several thousand women who do computing. And there's a lot of us out there. We're just not as visible as we need to be. So hopefully we'll just get more women out there doing presentations so that it's more obvious that we're here. And I hope that the women at this conference hear that and put in presentation, when they do requests for proposals, put in proposals, because we'd like to hear from you. Not just me. I don't like being the only woman up here talking. I want more of you women out here talking, because you got good ideas too. Anybody else? Yes.
1 second. In there.
I can offer an answer to both parts of those questions.
Cool. Great.
Not that I know anything from research, but I think a lot of the reason why women aren't involved in programming is purely cultural. Before I was a programmer, I was a jazz trumpet player, and there are no women in the jazz trumpet world, but there are plenty of women who are professional musicians, either in classical or playing other instruments, and it's really clear to me that that particular divide is purely cultural. Women don't play trumpet.
Right.
People hear that I meet people, I tell them I play trumpet, and the next time they see me, they ask me about my flute playing. I mean, it's amazing. And I think in terms of, I think people in general, men or women, are just by their nature likely to go into something that seems expected of them. And that's just through millions of tiny choices that you make throughout your life. I'm actually involved with one of the Pythonista groups in Boston that is organizing these training classes for women, and they are, in fact, always packed. And we do hope to get women past that point of sort of trying Python and get them into the actually, using Python and becoming Python programmers. So I think I totally agree that I think a lot of it is that women are not visible in the community, and women programmers are also not visible outside of the community. So other women who aren't part of a programming community don't realize that women program, and they only see men who are programmers, and so I think it just feeds into itself.
Yeah. And we're going to have a proposal from you for next year, right? Oh, good. Yay. And are you going to be at OSCON? Oh, next year. We want you there next year. Yay, Laura.
That was actually, the way the question was phrased is, why aren't there women in computing or something like that? As if there is a reason that there aren't, and we could change the reason, and then the women would show up. And that's probably the wrong way to look at it, because the way people who are studying this have discovered is the reason they're not there is because there aren't any women there. That is the reason. The way you get it to change is to put more women in, and then more will show up. But it's not like you can't sit around and say, what are we doing wrong because there aren't any women here? What you're doing wrong is you don't have any women here. That is what you're doing wrong. So you don't need to go around and listen to people who will tell you 9 million ways to feel guilty about yourself because there must be something hideously wrong with you. No. The reason they don't show up is that. Now, the really neat thing is that if the women do show up, there's a threshold. And there are people who I believe who think 20% of the community is the threshold, and they're arguing with some other people who say 30% is the threshold, and they're having lovely academic arguments, which you can read about in great detail, but somewhere out there is the threshold. And once you get that many women in, you can't keep them away. And in universities, you'll end up with your classes being 65% women, because more women than men show up for universities for things. So in Sweden, where I live, unlike other places in the world, if you go to any university and you go to chemistry, you'll find the classroom is absolutely packed full of women. Women. It doesn't mean they're studying physics and they aren't studying anything else and things like this. So the Swedish educational establishment is busy trying to figure out how the hell that happened, because they'd love to make it happen someplace else. And the answer really does seem to be that because of really rotten economic times, a whole bunch of women decided that they would get master's degrees in sciences because they thought it would be a good place to get a career, and bunches of them decided to go together to chemistry, for we still have no clue why, and all it took was having them there for tons and tons of people to continue to show up. Yeah. So the University of Linköping, which is in Sweden, decided that there wasn't enough women in computer science, and decided to take on the theory, it's just because they aren't there, and test it. So they took their computer science course, and they tossed out 3 courses that were known to be particularly mathematical and mostly about Turing machines, and which were universally thought to be not of particular relevance to the modern world. And then I went and asked a whole bunch of people what they think we should put in there. And they discovered everybody wanted to do web design and using the internet and pictures and graphics and stuff like this.
And that's everybody, not just the women.
Yeah, they asked everybody. And so they put a whole bunch of this and that, and then they called it a new sexy name, which I can't remember what it was, but it wasn't computer science, but it was interaction design or media studies or something like this. Yeah. But if you look at the course, it's really a lot like the computer science course that they had before. It just had a new name on the outside. Mm-hmm. And a whole lot of women showed up. And even more showed up next year, and even more showed up the year after that, until now I'm reading papers saying, we got a problem. We've got too many women in our media study classes, and some people are feeling uncomfortable because there aren't enough men there. So, so I don't think you should sit around trying to find out what's wrong with you. Exactly. What are we doing wrong? Because we may not be doing anything wrong.
Yeah.
It's just, we need to change this. But it's in the past, not enough women decided it would be a cool thing to do. But not enough women decided it would be cool to play the trumpet either. You know, it's not because trumpeters, though I used to be married to one, are really, really creepy people. You know, it's just the way the demographic is, and the way you change the demographic is to change the demographic, not let's change something else and hope the demographic will respond to it. You just go out after it. So
you rename this to your kitchen.
No. Yeah. Laura has a great point there. I mean, one of the things that I've seen happen at conferences is that women, and I've got a whole different talk on women in programming, but women will show up and be the only woman who shows up to the conference and not see any other women, and because they're the only woman, they don't come back the next year. And the next year, some other woman shows up, and they're the only woman there, and so they don't come back the next year. And this goes on. And so the way, as she said, the way to get more women to show up is to drag a woman here and say, so that you've got a lot of women here, and you
should
part
we
of
put
that.
It on the website? We have women.
Getting women as speakers, inviting women as speakers. If you don't get enough proposals from women, going specifically to the women's groups and saying, please submit proposals, we want them, can help you to get more women speakers so there's more visibility. But it's not just about women, it's about all sorts of forms of diversity. But women is one of the more visible versions. You had a question?
This is the last question, though.
Okay, last question, and then food. Oh.
Okay, but social scientists are good at doing experiments on people and like studies around the universities from Linköping or wherever. So wouldn't that be a great case to sponsor access to women? Act like Google does to women. So why don't we, like as community, take some of the money, some of the donations, and just ship a bunch of women to EuroPython, to put it bluntly.
Boy, that sounds interesting.
No, but seriously, if there's like good science behind these things, why don't we just do it through science?
Okay. So I think the suggestion of scholarship specifically targeted at women and other minority groups is a good one. Minorities as in minorities at the conference. And I think the PSF has actually looked at things like that. And I know for you, I know, PyLady's got a grant. I know at PyCon they've had a couple of targeted grants, things like that. So we are working on it, and we just need to do more. And we do encourage all of you to bring, if you are a woman or a man, bring someone unlike you to the conference, whatever that unlike you is. And if that's someone who speaks another language, someone who is the other gender, someone who is another race, someone who is just went to a completely different kind of college than you did, whatever that difference is, bring someone different from you to the next EuroPython or the next PyCon or to the next, sprint that you go to, and our user group, and just encourage them to get involved and let them know that they're welcome there. And I think that will help a lot.